Trails and Recreation Commission to order. It is Thursday, November 11th, 2021, Veterans Day, and it is 5:31 p.m. So if Pamela, if we could do the roll call of our members.
Of course. Kate Murphy is absent. Fred Wolf.
Here.
Rob Eber.
Here.
Aaron Gradinski is absent. Stephanie Dahl.
Here.
Tori Leviton.
Here.
Chelsea Scott.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. And I've been given the audience participation record, and nobody has put their name on it, so as far as I know, and nobody is here, we will move past audience participation and the consent agenda for the approval of the minutes from our October 14th, 2021 meeting. That should have been disclosed in our packets that we were all given ahead of time. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes that were provided? All right, are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from October 14th, 2021. Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, on to our unfinished business, which is the tree donation program. Emily?
Good evening, everyone. So as you'll recall, a few meetings ago, we went over a draft tree donation program with the thought being that we could start accepting donations of trees with plaques on them as opposed to the benches that we currently do. We are going to continue the bench donation program. This is really to provide another option for folks going forward as locations for benches become more limited. So the attachment in your packet details the proposed program. So you've reviewed this a couple meetings ago. We did update it, Jeff and I, to make sure that the tree caliper is now included. So the tree caliper has a minimum of 2 inches. And we did increase the tree donation fee by $200 based on looking ahead, what it looks like, cost of water and maintenance going forward are going to do. So we did increase that amount from $800 to $1,000. And the only other change to this, since you've seen it last, is to specify that it can be in honor or in memory of a loved one, rather than just in memorial. So the next step for this would be to bring it forward to a city council meeting for their approval. So there is a recommended motion in your packet to recommend city council approval. I don't have a date for that meeting yet, since it's not a super high priority and we're trying to get through the budget at the end of the year right now. So I'm anticipating this coming to council early next year. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I like it. I think we already went ahead before. We had approved the idea or liked the idea of doing a tree donation program. I think the $1,000 is less than the bench, because I believe the bench was $1,600.
$1,500.
$1,500. And I guess my question would be, is it time to raise the bench amount if a tree is $1,000 and is largely based on future maintenance, whether or not there's more maintenance that we need to add for the other one. But as far as the tree, I like this. I like the fact that we're going to put a small sign around the limb of the tree that I guess will be able to grow as the tree grows. But I think it's great.
Emily, if somebody does want to donate a tree to some member of their family, do they have a choice of where that tree is?
Yes, so Jeff would work with the family similar to the way that we do now with bench donations to find a location that's appropriate, and especially for the species of tree that they're looking to donate, to locate that tree.
Good.
Have we decided about what species of trees or we, recommend to them?
We have a list that Jeff keeps of trees that, are preferred for the city, basically. So he would provide that to them if they didn't have something specific in mind.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
I guess real quick, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Where it says it's available for parks and trails, I guess my only question is how does that work with respect to where we only have an easement for the trail? If somebody wants to put a tree there, it's technically not a recreational use, it's associated with the trail system. But are all trails allowed for tree donations, or do we see that some of these areas that are private property but easements are not allowable for a tree donation?
It would be a case-by-case basis, so we would look at that specific trail. We anticipate most of the donations would be in parks, and then some of the trails that might be considered are typically when we get a request for a bench donation along a trail, it's a trail within a park or it's adjacent to a park. So Jeff can work with them to make sure that it's appropriate for whichever land use is allowable in that space.
Do we have any plan for post-tree, and trees do not live forever? Is there any what happens at the end of this tree's life with the black and all that? Is there any protocol for that, or not ready to worry about that now?
I thought that we had added some replacement information in here. Are you talking about if the tree, so what Jeff and I discussed was if the tree were to not make it past, year 2, we would replace the tree at that point. We didn't really have a discussion about, at the end of its 50-year lifespan, that's a little bit beyond. I think at that point, Colorado might be in such a different place with water that we'll let the folks 50 years from now make that decision.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments? All right, can I get a motion?
I move to recommend city council approval of the new tree donation program as described in Exhibit B.
Second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. All right, perfect. All right. Moving on to our new business, which is the next phase of the trail renaming.
Before we talk about that, can I just ask, has everyone had a chance to go to Quincy and Holly to see the crew?
I drove past there again today.
Does everybody know what that looks like?
You mean
Yes.
the art?
The art.
I thought this was reports though, maybe?
Well, all right. I don't
Is
care.
now a good time?
If you prefer, I can
Sure.
address that now. So the Art Commission is not going to be returning to PTRC with a request to place Crew Series in a park. They are looking to place it in a right-of-way at this point. One of the locations they're considering is out by this RTD bus stop at Quincy University, but they are not planning to put it in a park in the future. That being said, it is not going to stay at Quincy and Holly. That's a Denver Water property. There's a huge Denver Water vault underneath that property that you can actually climb down into, and it's a room where several of their valves are and a 96-inch water line. So they're going to be doing work on that property starting approximately August 2022. So that corner is going to be very torn up. It's going to be disruptive. We had a pre-con meeting with them this week to talk about planning and traffic control and everything that's going to happen around that. So
How long is that project supposed to take?
it's in 3 phases. So we don't have a timeline for the 3rd phase yet, but the first 2, I believe, are through It's like 6 weeks and then another 6 weeks and then maybe 4 weeks. It's gonna be several months. So we're gonna do everything we can to minimize the disruption to folks and see if we can even have them create another lane, you know, at that intersection so that they don't have to close, you know, so they don't have to have it down one lane for too long. But long story short, the cruise series can't stay where it is right now. So our commission is looking at other locations, but not within a park.
When's the underground wiring supposed to be done? Because that seems like a
Like 6 months ago?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Months ago.
Yeah.
We
It's
are,
worked out, but we're waiting on.
so everything is done besides Excel actually undergrounding the power lines. So all of the utilities have their lines off of those poles at this point. And Jay is just tearing out his hair at this point, trying to get Excel to move faster than they are moving. But
They're terrible.
hopefully very soon.
Okay.
Does that answer your cruise series question?
I have no idea if you answered my question. I drove by and I just stopped and I looked at it and I just thought, that's just silly.
That's the
What is that?
That's the point.
Well,
That's the point?
It's whimsical. I still like it.
Well, that's okay, because it won't be in a park, so.
Wow.
All right, on to trail
Okay.
renaming.
Okay,
My turn.
Fred, yeah, you can take it away.
Yeah.
I do just have an update to give you from Jeff related to this, that he has ordered all the signs that,
Yeah.
that you guys had spoken about for the Woody Hollow Trail, and then they'll be installed later this month.
That's correct. All of the signs, as Emily just said, have been ordered. Not only the big signs at the top of the post on the angle, but all the information signs underneath it that give you the time and the mileage to the Highline Canal, to the Village Center, to Woody Hollow Park. So whether you're walking this way or this way, the information signs all make sense. So that's the Woody Hollow Park Trail that goes from basically Franklin and Cherryvale all the way to right here. So that's done. I've completed the field work on what we call the Cherry Trail, which is the trail in red right here, which is basically it's a major connector trail between the Woody Hollow Park Trail, sorry, Chelsea.
You're fine.
And the Glenmore Trail completely surrounds the Glenmore golf course. So this connector trail is a mile and 6/10 long. It has 5 signs along it. All of that information I have developed. I haven't given it to Jeff yet. My goal is that by the first of the year, Woody Hollow will be finished, Glenmore Trail will be finished, Cherry Trail will be finished, and the little, what I call the Oxford Trail in that western part of the village here in green, that'll be finished. So that's approximately half of the named trails that I put together on this plan, and then as soon as the first of the year begins, then we'll get going on the Holly Trail, the Pheasant Ridge Trail, the Buell Lake Trail, and of course the Village Trail is what kind of ties the whole thing together. And there's an awful lot of overlap between certain trails and certain sections of the Village Trail. I've also told Jeff that I think that at every single decision point for every trail, whenever somebody comes to a point that they can go left, they can go right, there should be a trash can. And I'm getting a little pushback on that because they're going, oh my God, how many trash cans is that? The problem is, even the corral, which is right here at Cherryvale and Franklin, which is literally across from my driveway, people over the months have dumped their dog poop bags into that corral. And it's nice, it's created a pile of black plastic bags. And so I showed that to Jeff and said, this is why we need a trash can here. So people, when they do have a dog poop bag, they're looking around for, now, what do I do with it? Personally, I don't know why they don't carry, if they know their dog's gonna do this, why they don't carry a bag with them to put the poop bag in and then dispose of it properly, but they don't. They just get to a point and they set it on top of fence posts, they dump it into the corrals. So, at every one of these decision points, I'm suggesting we have a trash can. And that trash can doesn't have to be checked by the city. Most of them don't have to be checked maybe once a year. So it's not a big deal that they have to, Dustin and Jameson have to run around and empty all these trash cans. So we're learning as we go along. So I guess that's all I have to say.
So, question.
Yes.
So when you have a proposal like that, are you bringing this, who are you bringing this to the city? I mean, like, is it something you can request and then like for the extra garbage cans, or is that, how do you go through that process? I guess I don't understand. Like, can you make a motion here and then?
Well, it's part of this plan, and then I suggested to Jeff Roberts, and I guess he takes it to Jay, I don't know.
But it's a city thing.
And there's some trash cans I've found that need to be relocated. I mean, I've found 2 trash cans that are literally across from each other on the trail. We don't need 2 trash cans there. So let's put it somewhere else. So it just takes, as you're walking through this, and I found the posts with those numbered signs on it in places that has no bearing on anything. So as we go along with their ATV, we yank those out, fill those holes in, and if the post is not too rotten, we can reuse it in other places. So we're just trying to go through it step by step. So that's where we are.
What about, getting a phone number on every trash can, say, when full, please call this number. Put it on like people using the trash cans to be like, now it's time to empty it, so it's not like a continuous thing, because maybe some will be used a lot, and some won't be used, like you said,
So
at all.
just like your kitchen trash at home, if you were to just leave it only with a little bit of food in it and leave it for months, we can't not empty trash cans for months at a time, because they become really, really foul. And if you're living nearby or you're walking that trail, we would be getting complaints. So it is a balance between, there are definitely spots where we need more, because
Yeah.
you can go quite a ways without hitting one, but it is a balance of, it does take extra staff time to go down, the trail and collect the trash from that trail. And we do right now try and hit every one of them weekly, because especially ones with dog poop in them, you kind of want to hit them weekly.
Well, the fellows on the ATV, Jameson and Dustin, who I work with, they run around and replace fence posts and rails all the time, because I'm passing new ones. So they're out there. So
For sure.
during the course of their travels, they can check on these trash cans. That'll just be part of their job. They're there anyway. And all of our signs are being located with the thought, is there enough room for the ATV and the grass cutting vehicles to get by that sign? So we're not blocking anybody.
Perfect.
So
So Emily, sounds like that's kind of for the phase, or for the end of the year where we're at. Are you looking for where we want to go after that, or was that what you needed?
No, that's really, I asked Fred if he would be ready to give an update, so that was exactly what we needed, just to keep the rest of the commission on track. This is a project that, you've all approved and been working on, so we don't need to make motions or anything related to it, so we'll just keep plugging along with those goals by January 1st, and then moving into the next year, one of my goals for next year is to keep working through this project and get it finished. And then looking ahead to 2023 already somehow, starting to plan for getting new trail maps that reflect the newly named trails so that people can navigate better once all the new signs are in.
Right.
But really, from the commission tonight, all we need is any feedback that you have for Fred, and we'll just keep working on it.
And I don't know if any of you commissioners have noticed, but I certainly have. There are e-bikes on the Highline Canal. So, you know, that'll just be a process before people finally,
I feel like we have that on our staff reports coming up, so we
We
can,
do.
we can
Yeah.
put a pause on that and then discuss it as it comes up in approximately about 10 things.
Yeah.
yeah.
Great.
The only other thing that I wanted to note, and I have a question for Fred, is that the commission, we've spent an awful lot of time on looking at signage, what it says, how big it is, how little it is. I don't know if this is part of your report, Emily, that's coming up, but last night, the Citizens Advisory Task, whatever our title is, on the master plan, met, and there became a strong discussion about e-bikes on the canal and on our trails as part of the recommendation on a question and survey that is out there, and if you haven't done it, please do so. But the response was, you know, much like what we had a discussion about before, some on one side, some on the other side. What I found interesting about it was that one of the people, and I can't remember if it was the city manager, who made the comment that he had spoken with police officers who have noted that they would have a hard time issuing any kind of a speeding ticket on the canal because the signage is too small for people to be put officially on notice that e-bikes and what the speed is for non-e-bikes on the canal. So we spent an awful lot of time on, as a commission, talking about that we didn't want to over-sign and oversize our signs. And now we're seemingly, and I think the police are welcome to come and talk to us in the beginning of the new year about some of their findings, because I believe they were offered up in our meeting last night for after the new year. But I think we either didn't get a checkoff box from the police as to the size of our speed limit and no e-bikes notices, or if we did get it, there might be some thoughts, but what I'm hearing is that the police don't think they can enforce because it's not big enough to put people on notice. I'll just leave it out there at that. I don't think there's anything we can do other than the fact, if we want to, for some reason, just put up really big signs and then nobody can argue about it, but I don't think that goes inconsistent with what we've talked about in the past.
I feel like because this that issue still exists, right? We know it still exists. I know Emily has a report on it, things like that. That I don't disagree with you. I think if we're going to truly prohibit them, I do think we need to have further discussions with the police to figure out what signing do you need, things like that. But I think right now what we might want to do is kind of parking lot the issue for a hot second until we find out where this is going, and then we can figure out how we're going to react to that.
And I'm not asking to raise the issue of e-bikes versus non-e-bikes. What I tried to transmit is that the police are telling us that the signs that we've spent a lot of time on are too small to be enforceable. So as we work on new trails and new signs that go with it, I want us to make sure that we add a box to the police officers' check off that they're okay with our sign size.
Well, the sign size on these trails that I've just talked about, e-bikes should never be allowed on our dirt surface bridle trails.
Yeah, I'm not talking about whether they're, I'm talking about the speed, that's all.
Well, we're only talking about the Highline Canal then.
No, I'm talking about everywhere in the village, wherever the signs are that tell people what the speed limit on our trail system is.
Well, all of my signs on all of these trails.
Right, are all on the,
No,
no,
all
they're
the
all on
signs,
city trails.
all the signs on Woody Hollow Park, Cherry Trail, Glenmore, one of the information signs below the sign that says what the name of the trail is, it says no e-bikes on trail.
Correct.
Every single sign has that sign. Now, Yes, it's smaller than the trail sign at the top, but the nameplate at the bottom says, no e-bikes on trail, dogs must be on leash, and please pick up your dog poop bags. Those 3 things are on one plate on every single sign.
I think that maybe what we can do is, I think moving forward, possibly Emily, if you could add to your ever-growing list of things to do, is to maybe touch base with the police department to find out if there is something that we're gonna put on us, just in general. so we know.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No
We're
problem.
mixing multiple issues and oversimplifying. So there's multiple, I did not want to do this. There are multiple things that the police need in order to enforce for speeding on trails. I can't get into all of them, not being a police officer. Part of it is that their enforcement comes under the model traffic code, and there's a little bit of confusion, particularly on my part, about enforcing when it's outside the model traffic code, but in our city code. And that's something that we would need to address with our police officers and the attorney before we got to the issue of the size of speed limit signs. And because this is a dynamic issue that might still be changing, as I will get to in my reports, that's sort of 4th on the list of things that would need to happen for enforcement of 2 separate issues, speeding versus e-bikes. So I hear what you're saying about, signs needing to be a certain size to enforce for speeding, but that's sort of a later question than the point that we're at right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be a process.
I just wanted to make sure we coordinate, that's all. That's all I was trying to say, is that I heard something about a problem about enforceability, and I'm relating it to the commission because we've looked at the signs in the past and approved what we see, and we like what we see. And now I heard last night a potential issue, and that's all I wanted to do was alert everybody.
And the only thing I was bringing up, Emily, is I think just in future, because there may be things that we put on these signs, it would be, I think, helpful for all of us to know, are there actual dimensional requirements? I doubt there are. I've never seen one, and I was a prosecutor and did criminal defense, but I never saw one. But nonetheless, I don't know everything, I admit that. But are there any sort of requirements from a signage standpoint, so that if we're trying to consider what we want to put on signs, we know what needs to be included? If I'm going to actually make something up, that if it's a speed limit sign, it has to be 1 foot by 2 foot. We know that to include it in their sign. So if there's anything like that we need to know for future signs, I think that would be helpful to us.
Definitely.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right.
And I personally have not been to either end of the Highline, where it meets Hamden and where it meets Bellevue, to see what size. I'm told there's no e-bike sign there, but I don't know what size it is.
I can show you if you give me a second and I can remember what the photos are.
Because when they come underneath Hamden, I would think if they're on an e-bike, they're trying to get some momentum to get back up, if they do go back up, but maybe they're going too fast to read a smaller sign.
It is about this big, and it's red on white.
Oh, well,
It's pretty big.
that's pretty big.
If that's not big enough, that's your own fault.
Yeah, you shouldn't be riding a bike if you can't read that.
Glasses, and you shouldn't be on any
So
skateboard.
since we're here already, if
Yeah.
you're ready to move into reports,
Yeah, let's move
I'll
into
give
reports
this
and then-
report first, since we're
Yeah.
on this topic instead of jumping around. So I did receive a phone call last week about, it was a complaint about e-bikes, but the complaint was specifically about enforcement, and that the police department is not doing enough to enforce for e-bikes, specifically on the Highline Canal for this person. So we are now, as I emailed you all about, the only jurisdiction along the Highline Canal that prohibits e-bikes along the 71 miles. With the exception of Waterton Canyon, so you don't run into a sheep during the ride. And we are also the middle of the 71 miles. We have the midpoint of the canal. So this clearly presents a lot of challenges for our police department to be able to enforce for this. So the city manager has asked the police chief to address this for city council in a study session and the difficulties of enforcement at a January study session. Right now we're planning on January 18th. That date might change. I'll keep PTRC posted as we get closer with that date. And she will also come to PTRC either in January or February. We're still working that date out as well. So that you can hear directly from the police department about enforcement. It is a very difficult issue. They're out there as much as they can be. They have their own e-bike. They also have a mountain bike. That being said, policing is about priorities. When there are people going 65 on Bellevue, when there are burglaries happening, e-bikes is not the top priority for the police department when some of these other things are going on. So it is a challenge for them, and you will be able to ask questions of them and hear directly from the police department early next year.
Well, I would hope, I know Cherry Hills Village is the only jurisdiction that currently has this position on e-bikes, but I would hope that we don't put out a pressure and say, oh, since everybody else is doing it, I guess we have to do it too. If you read the Cherry Hills Village Charter, which you can see online, and it says rural character must be preserved, and I think having e-bikes is just one little chink in downgrading that feeling we have about Cherry Hills Village, and I don't think we should give in. I hope we don't.
Well said.
Yeah.
All right, Emily, anything else on the e-bikes on that?
No,
All right.
hopefully not. So in terms of other reports for Quincy Farm, which the commission has asked to get an update every month. So at the November 2nd council meeting, we presented two concepts to city council about Quincy Farm going forward. One concept is that city council's role would change from the originator of ideas for Quincy Farm to more of a reviewing body. And the mechanism for that to happen would be that Cherry Hills Land Preserve could start driving that process by creating an annual plan for the farm in terms of what programming they anticipate for the following year. And based on that programming, any improvements to the farm or changes to the farm that would need to be made. So this is just an example off the top of my head, but if they were having a lot of programs on the east side and said, hey, we really need an accessible restroom on that side, that's something that would go into the plan for city council then to be able to review, possibly incorporate elements into the city's budget for the following year, and then go forward with this sort of more organic, incremental process with the land preserve driving the ideas versus city council having to take a huge master plan, come up with all the ideas for all aspects of the farm and approve it. Which is the situation they had sort of been left in earlier. So council agreed with those two concepts, and at this point, we're in the process, staff is in the process of drafting an MOU with a memorandum of understanding with the Land Preserve in order to move that process forward. So basically we'd be solidifying those ideas in the MOU, and then starting next year, the Land Preserve would start putting forward this annual plan. So
I have a question. Does Quincy Farm Committee exist anymore?
On paper, it's paused basically, but at this point, we have, I think, only basically because the endings of terms have come and gone this year. We would need to, or council would need to take action in order to reappoint folks to the committee, to restart the committee, but
So,
the committee is officially paused by city council at this point, and so it does still exist because they didn't dissolve it, but functionally it doesn't exist.
okay.
Isn't it amazing that Kat Anderson passed away in 2016, And here we are in 2021, and we still don't know what we're doing or what we're going to do with Quincy Farm. I think that's amazing.
Oh, you don't get what government enough.
No, I know, it's a shame.
It's a shame, actually. It's
The
a shame.
good thing is that the land preserve had a lot of programming last year at the farm, so there is a lot happening at the farm. Not so much now because it's winter and it's colder, but they had a great trail walk at the farm a couple months ago. They had 200 people attend and get out there and see Hawk West was there and.
No, things are happening now. It's just, it feels like we've kind of wasted a lot of time with the Colorado Open Land Foundation because every time we opened our mouth, they vetoed it. Whatever we suggested. I was at those meetings at the farm, and I thought, man, this is not positive. This is not uplifting. This is negative energy. That's what I got out of it. So
Well,
I hope we're on the right track now.
we hope so too. So we're planning to present at least a draft of the MOU to City Council on December 8th at their December meeting. So hopefully that will be some positive momentum going forward.
I hope so.
May I just ask, is the planned MOU with the land preserve because the land preserve was the only entity left standing, so to speak, to do an MOU with after the initial, or after the determination and then not resubmittal by the Anderson family, it left only the land preserve having made a submittal?
No, I mean, City Council is very aware that for any RFP or RFQ process, they are free to choose no one. That's something that they're very familiar with, so it wasn't, they could have said, okay, thanks, we aren't really in favor of this proposal either, so thanks, but no thanks, we'll keep working on Quincy Farm on our own and bring back the committee, or, they had every option available to them. I think that they made the decision to go forward because they saw some positive aspects to working with Cherry Hills Land Preserve, and they've been successfully doing programming out there for the past couple of years, so I think that.
So it sounds like there was an actual determination that they're comfortable going with land preserve and they want to see if they can get an MOU to explain kind of that relationship, and if they're comfortable with it, they will move forward with an MOU.
Yes, their direction to staff was to pursue an MOU with the land preserve.
Okay, I'm a little surprised by the sole sourcing, but I understand the directive for purposes of staff.
Parks code changes, so the changes to the municipal code regarding parks that PTRC approved at the October meeting went to council for first reading on November 2nd. The only change that council suggested was keeping the language about needing a permit to set up a table in a park or trail. So that language is going to remain, so you will continue, well, that's what we're bringing them on second reading, is that you would continue to need a permit from the city manager or a special event permit in order to set a table up. There was some concern from city council that it could lead to basically soliciting along in parks or on trails if we were to allow that, so they opted to continue forward with basically the status quo that we have right now. But that was the only suggested change from council coming out of first reading. So they'll consider the new language and the rest of the language that PTRC saw for second reading on November 16th, so next Tuesday.
Emily, isn't there a no solicitation in the village as it is?
Yes.
So if somebody was soliciting whether they had a table or not, it would not be permitted?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I guess, except my question is it's private property if they're on the canal? Does the city, if we're talking about soliciting in a table on the Highline Canal, that's private property, and isn't that an issue for Double Water to say? I don't know if that's immediately enforceable by the police to enforce things that are on private property.
That gets into, that came up a little bit at the council meeting, and our attorney is prepped for this upcoming meeting because we did get into a little bit of both a private property general water aspect, and the city has a recreational lease on that property, so that's a little convoluted, and the First Amendment issue on the other side, so, frankly, I can't answer that question. We just went with the direction to add table back in, and I'm gonna let council and the attorney suss that out. The application for a vacation of city interest in bridle trails on 2 and 4 Canto is also going before council next Tuesday for second reading. It is a public hearing, so all the neighbors to those 2 properties have been notified according to the code. It's been published in the Villager and it's been posted on site. And we haven't received any negative public comment letters to date, so that will go before council again next Tuesday for their consideration and their final determination.
Emily, can I ask a question about that Canto? Do you know exactly where that is?
Yes. It's 2 and 4 Canto.
Okay.
This is the item that we looked at a number of months or a few months ago.
PTRC considered it in April.
Yeah, I remember presenting something because I met some owners over there, Judith Judd for one, and we walked. She was concerned about the guy that just built the big house on the Dominic property. What's his name? Greg Maffei. And the old, apparently there's a trail that went across his property, and he just thought, I'm closing that down. And the people were upset about it, and
Can you get to a city council meeting on Tuesday?
there's a perfect connection though over there that I suggested that connects into the bridge that crosses the Highline Canal. And I'm thinking, is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, it is. I remember they came before us and they asked us about 3 segments of contested canal. There was the north, the south, that is what you're talking about, that a number of us had said was a proposed trail that could go right from where Union Avenue turns to the north and comes downhill.
Yes.
If it was to go straight out to the west and go to the canal.
Right.
So there's, remember again, what we looked at was a north segment that went east-west, a south segment that went east-west, and a third segment that went on a northwest to southeast diagonal that was basically the property line, and I'll use original owners, on the west edge of the old Connors property,
Right.
and what is now the east edge of the new owner, which I believe is
Ken Theory.
O'Leary.
Ken Theory.
And so those were the 3 segments that we looked at, and if you remember, PTRC voted, I think it was 3-2, to not recommend that the city vacate. It went before P&Z. P&Z voted 3-1, I think it was, to recommend that the city council approve the vacation. And then it went to the first hearing of it, and our regulations required then an ordinance to go forward. And the ordinance enacts a new law that vacates, and that was read last Tuesday at the city council meeting with the public hearing and the second reading and possibly approval or disapproval of action on the November 16th meeting, which is next Tuesday night. But we did look at it, is my point.
Well, if all this is approved, then it will become part of our village trails plan.
No, that's incorrect. The opposite.
Was he permanently removed as an
But
option?
the issue that came before us, I think there was more than just, will we approve, do we want to turn this back over or not? I think there was an issue in terms of the legality of how this was originally obtained, or whether it was
Well,
actually,
It wasn't accepted.
by the city. So I think there was also a different, it wasn't just as straightforward as that. I think there was also some legal issues that have come up through that and kind of going through that.
Well, the northern leg, as we see on our map here, the northern lake. To the north of that, that's where the Judds live. And to the south of that is where the Theories live. And I get why, because that doesn't lead anywhere. There's no bridge at the Highline Canal where that
Feels like
ends.
it's on their property too.
That makes no sense.
This isn't before PTRC to make a decision. You have already made a recommendation on it, so I would ask
Well,
the commission not to get into a heated discussion about it because it has already been,
Yeah,
your
but-
recommendation has already been made. Any individual PTRC member is welcome to come speak to council on Tuesday as an individual. But at this time, it's not.
Okay, so.
It's not before PTRC to decide. This was just an update, but
So the south red line here on the map, that is going to be vetoed. Is that right? The south line, the bottom line.
the
that
proposal
connects-
before city council is to vacate any city interest in these bridle trail easements. So
Okay.
should council pass the ordinance on Tuesday, the city would have no interest in these easements.
Okay,
Translation, Fred, the red lines go away. There are no trails where the red lines are.
okay,
And to be clear, there are not public trails there now.
right. Well, that's unfortunate because the red line at the bottom,
It does not connect all the way through. There would need to be a segment dedicated on 7 Cantato for it to actually connect over to Cantato Lane.
well, I'm just saying that all the people that live in Charlevoix, once they cross Holly, this is the most direct way for them to get to the Highline Canal. And there's a bridge and it's all set. I've walked it a couple of times. It made all the sense in the world to me of why this shouldn't be a trail. And now for everybody to say, no, no trail, I mean, that's crazy, because that makes all the sense.
I think probably, because I think to Emily's point, and I don't disagree with her, we have addressed this, and I don't think we need to get into it, and I hear what you're saying. So my thought is,
No.
it is, city council's on Tuesday the 16th, and I would encourage any commission members to appear and let their voices be heard on that, as an individual, but about what they want to see happen and what you've walked on the trail and things like that.
And I would only add in that, one of the things that we did have a spirited discussion when it came before us is, we are on the record. I know that the P&Z minutes are going before council. I would hope that the PTRC
Yes, they are
minutes
in the
are also
packets.
included, and it sounds like they are. But if you are interested in continuing, look back at your old discussion and the minutes from the meeting that we had, so that we can not be at odds as individuals, or just to recall what it is that we did, if people choose to participate again on the 16th. I think the one thing that I would add to Emily's report on that is that there actually will be a public hearing component of the meeting on the 16th to solicit public comment. The first reading on the second reading on the 16th will have a public comment period, and they will invite everybody to participate. I think you can do it only in person, or is it an online version?
It was only in person. We were back to in person.
So you have to come to the council meeting on the 16th and sign up as a public speaker, and Emily's comment that if we do come and speak, it is in our individual capacity because they already have PTRC's overall recommendation.
What time is that meeting? 16?
The study session begins at 5:30. The regular meeting will begin at 6:30. I don't remember.
Go ahead, Emily.
I'll be there.
Highline Canal.
I have 3 more. Okay. Highline Canal. City Council approved the memorandum of understanding regarding the canal collaborative at their November 2nd meeting. So all jurisdictions along the canal are in the process of approving that MOU, and that's really going to shape the way that we're all working together moving forward. All the jurisdictions along the canal, including stormwater districts like Mile High Flood and Denver Water and the Highline Canal Conservancy. So really it's a structure that tells us how we'll all work together, when we'll meet, what levels of government we'll meet, all that fun stuff. Which is just an exciting next step in terms of the canal's future. Any questions about Highline Canal? Oh, I'm sorry, and stormwater. Our RFP for a stormwater consultant to look at putting stormwater in the Highline Canal closed a couple weeks ago, so we have interviews with 3 firms next Tuesday morning. So we'll select a firm to move forward with, and in 2022 we'll be looking at a more detailed study of putting stormwater in the Highline Canal and sort of formalizing some of the stormwater going into the canal that we already have in terms of building small structures in the canal's bottom in order to slow the water that's in the canal and hopefully keep the canal wetter for more days a year, which will, going forward, benefit the tree canopy as Denver Water stops using it for irrigation, since it's an inefficient way to deliver water. So exciting canal stuff is happening. We don't have any business items for December for PTRC, so provided there are no objections, we will cancel our regularly scheduled December 9th meeting and plan to meet again in January.
December 8th.
What's your objection, and back to this, my objection.
It's like,
We'll post it no matter what the date is. I think council is the 8th.
oh, okay.
And council in December is strange and is on Wednesday, always. And then finally, the final projects and priorities list for next year is on the dais for you. So PTRC approved these at the September meeting. So everyone has sort of a work plan for next year, and we'll plan to meet again in January.
Okay, great, so.
Just one question here. The survey that we were all sent in the village,
Yes.
I couldn't find when that survey had to be mailed back, or,
You can bring it in and drop it off if you prefer. They are all due on November 30th.
Correct?
And then one of the reasons we don't have, well, not one of the reasons, but we won't have all those results compiled from our consultant in time for PTRC's meeting, which is part of the reason we're canceling December, since we don't have anything on that agenda. But Paul Workman, our senior planner, will come and present the results from that master plan survey as they pertain to parks to you all either in January or February, just depending how much time it takes to compile everything.
Great, perfect. All right, Chelsea, do you have any?
No, Commissioner reports?
Yeah,
Okay.
Commissioner reports.
I just have 2 questions. So on that master plan, I was curious, I talked briefly to Pam about it, that you've gotten a great response, which is awesome.
Yeah,
to that.
we have over 300 responses back already, which is more than 10%, which is amazing.
So is it possible to just kind of summarize the process? So I know you just mentioned when the information's gonna come back, but is everyone gonna look through them and then compile all the results, and how are those gonna be decided on and prioritized? I'm just kind of curious how that
I
process
would
is.
hand that over to Mr. Ebert. So it's all available online. There's actually, if you go to chvillagevision.com,
See, Village.
Village Vision, it lays out the whole timeline, but I'm not, since it's very early days, I don't really get involved until we start getting survey results back, so I'm a little bit out of the loop in terms of the whole process.
Okay, so that kind of leads into the next question, thank you, that's great. So for example, when you mentioned the work plan for 2022 and kind of what's happening with PTRC and all the different commissions, is it ever possible, either through this master plan or through PTRC or through the city, to make a recommendation on something that could happen? And here's what I mean by that. So as of late, I've joined a lot more boards, and I've been watching presentations of a lot of development happening in the metro, not so much in the village, but in and around the metro. And there's some really amazing and innovative water solutions to reduce water usage, and I know that that's all being worked on throughout, just within the parks and the trails, and that's something that Harriet's doing and everyone's doing. There's some really new cool sustainable grasses, some amazing tree replacement programs for lost trees, and it just has me thinking, like, is this anything that could ever be presented in any way, shape, or form to the city, and how would that happen? What would that look like? And is that part of the master? I mean, I guess, again, I'm always asking process questions because I'm just not really sure how this stuff comes to fruition, and so if there's anything you can kind of enlighten me on there, that would be great.
Yeah, sustainability actions that the city can take, both the city as an entity and in the way that we have some of our building regulations and water regulations are both in that survey. So my understanding is that going forward, sustainability is going to be part of the master plan in terms of what residents would like to see happen. So I do believe that's going to be incorporated.
So that's kind of why my questions are fused together, is like, once that process takes place and you review all of the responses from the master plan and you start making decisions, like, can PTRC weigh in on that? Will you go through a list of kind of how the city is gonna make those choices? Is that, do you see what I'm saying? So like, let's say that half of the city wants to do something in sustainable in some way, and the other half doesn't. Like, where does that decision-making process occurring?
A lot of it is going to be at the level of the CAT, so the Citizens Advisory Task Force, to prioritize, how those responses come back. And then planning and zoning is really the entity that
That's what I thought.
makes the larger decisions and with the CAT's feedback. And then it will go up to city council. So those are really the three bodies that are going to have a big say in the overall master plan. But Paul coming to present to you all is the first step in terms of parks getting involved. And there are definitely going to be opportunities for PTRC to throw your weight behind suggestions that are coming in from public input.
Sure. Okay, that's super helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
With permission, can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Why don't we, I'm done. Okay, so why don't we go to your reports and do that, and we'll just go down.
Okay, just as part of my report, let me help you a little bit in terms of, so last night we had our second advisory task force meeting, and there have been, as Pamela mentioned, over 300 as of last night. It was, I think, 324 responses. And while that is, initially there was some discussion about whether that's a percentage of households in the village, people in the village. It was made clear that two different members of the same house could have submitted two submittals. And so it may not be quite as broad a participation rate as initially thought.
How many households, do we know that number?
We have approximately 6,500 residents, or residents in the village.
It's between 2,200 and 2,300 households
Okay, thank you.
that we mailed out
It's
to.
over 10%. So
Well, it's over 10%.
Potentially.
It could be 10%, it could be less. That's one of the questions that we asked to try and frame up a little bit last night. But the bottom line is that the response, whether it's 4% or 10% or whatever percentages, we've gotten 320 people weighing in on this survey, and that's great. It is not the end point, and therefore they really, really want people to continue to weigh in between now and the end of the month. There are 22 different questions with sub-questions in there. You can answer all of them, some of them. And what is online that Emily mentioned is, so far, all of the responses have been listed. And what we went through last night was to try and take a general idea of some trends that we saw as a result of those comments and try and summarize some of those. One of the things that you hit on was the question of sustainability, and that is, we tried to look at the 2008 master plan and see if there are continuations of the things that were in the 2008 plan, and whether there's desires to eliminate some of those things or add new things. And sustainability was one of the new things that now has cropped up in, whether it manifests itself in building code changes, the percentage of build out on properties, or is there going to be a statement that says Cherry Hills Village is now interested in seeing sustainability principles incorporated into, we are a community who favors X, whatever the X is. And so if there's desire, I welcome your comments to be submitted formally in that survey, if you haven't done so already. Because there weren't as many comments on sustainability as there were on some of the other areas. What I was going to say, and part of that is that in terms of actual operational, like you want to incorporate a new type of grass or water saving plan. That may not necessarily be in the master plan, other than a general statement that we want to incorporate sound principles of operation to include blah, 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 including sustainable practices. But operationally, after the master plan is, I think your second question of how does that get implemented? And I would say that Jeff Roberts is the person that I've always asked about ideas, and if you come up with a great new grass, you know, can always go to Jeff and say, hey, how about this new grass, or how about this new technique? And he will figure out on an operational level whether or not it's something that the village would incorporate. I don't know, I assume it would include you, Emily, but I
guess,
you know,
yeah,
Jeff's sort of that operational manager.
There are great points, and some of the goals in that master plan seem lofty in certain senses too, right? Some of those photos of what the streetscape looked like, I was like, wow, this looks like Georgia, you know, it doesn't look like Colorado could even look, the streets couldn't look like this necessarily, but just how these were gonna be decided on, and that's super helpful and insight, and I could definitely reach out to Jeff if so, but how this is all gonna be decided on, compiled, data entered, you know, and then determined, and which ones are actually feasible or not, just of interest.
The bottom line story of the data for purposes of PTRC is that the data strongly reinforced what we already knew, which is that people in this community value public space and trails and open space and parks. Asking them to add more to it and spend money is less clear in terms of, you know, everybody wants it, fewer people want to pay for it. But not to be unaffected, but the take-home message is there is a strong purpose for what we all do on PTRC, and it is recognized as, if not the most important, consistent remark that I saw in the summation of the master plan, but very, very important. So weigh in, get everybody else to weigh in. We still need a whole lot more participation, although we are happy. The plan will be that we took what we had as of last night and summarized it. Whatever happens after November 30th, it will be re-tabulated. And at that point, there is a working session, short presentation, I think to City Council sometime in December on just status of what we've been doing, with nothing other than a briefing. The next meeting will be January the 20th for the advisory task force. Will be January 20th to try and come up with more suggestions and pass forward of, we want this to change in the wording, and we have to justify why. We want this, and that's the idea, that it will actually translate then into the starting of some language of a master plan.
Mm-hmm. And you guys have mentioned this as a great response, so I'm curious, in previous times, was it like 50 people, 150 responses? I'm just curious.
The last master plan was in 2008, so I
I'm
don't,
not sure.
yeah, I don't have a good idea.
Okay, I'm just curious, because I wonder, yeah, it sounds like participation's increased, which is great, so, okay.
With respect to the task force, that's all I have to say. I did want to mention that separately I was approached and asked to participate in I don't even know what it was called, the city set up with a consultant to try and get a couple of different perspectives on some issues that may come up on bills or potential proposals. I don't know how I was selected, but it doesn't matter. There were 3 different questions, and I only mentioned they're not new and different, they're not secret, but 2 of which sort of impact PTRC, and one of them was trying to, well, one of the 3 specifically was whether or not, and we've heard different discussions in the past on a very cursory level. One of them might be a question of whether or not the citizens vote to allow the city council to access part of the parks fund and move it over to the general operations portion of the budget. Right now, parks funds, and I'm going to do the best I can to make sure I get this right. Parks funds are only allowed to be used for parks purposes. General funds can be used for purposes, but parks funds cannot be used for non-park purposes. And apparently, there are projections out a number of years from now that, depending on what level of spending there is by the village, we could be at or negative in some balances within the city funds. And so the question was, would people want to consider whether or not the city can move money from parks budgets to others? And so that issue I want to alert as a budget issue to all of us and tell us all to keep a good track. I mean, I had my personal opinions and I'm not going to share them with the commission, but I want everybody to know that that is a lurking issue out there and that we need to be active and involved. The other question, like I say, was a just general budget question, and that is, as a result of a number of activities, like I said, that would potentially put us in a negative or near negative fund balance for the city, there are a number of items in that tentative analysis. And so I want everybody to know that there's a lot of discussion about the budget in the future and questions that are coming before us right now. But I think I asked, and I would suggest to everybody else, that we look at the number of different issues, because it's going to come down to having a potential impact on us in prioritizing the activities that we want in open space and what we may or may not want to assess fees, taxes, whatever on, or how to finance those different things. I don't know if that makes sense to everybody, but my hope is stay aware of budget issues and the discussion and impacts they may have on open space, because there are many. Cat Anderson's property is a huge impact on budget, potentially, and it greatly affects both our Parks Fund as well as other opportunities we may have for parks activities. So that is out there. In closing, I'd also like to formally recognize that today is Veterans Day. I'd like to recognize the sacrifices and the patriotism of our veterans. I would like to note the level of sacrifice of our former veterans and also the disruption that came to their individual lives in the name of national progress. I'd like to recognize that many of the citizens historically took great patriotic efforts in World War II. For instance, there were stories that people on the West Coast in particular covered their windows to black out their houses. We went through fuel rationing, many other activities that people accepted restrictions on their personal lives in the name of patriotism. I would like to note that that level of sacrifice and patriotism is radically different than that which is compared to today's alleged patriots who seek solely to espouse individual rights, seeking only their individual rights without recognition of the national good and patriotism of our veterans that sacrificed many and everything on behalf of us. And therefore, I would like to recognize the valor and patriotism of our veterans. And I ask our citizens to fully recognize that the unbridled individual rights that we hear so much talked about today were specifically rejected by the founding fathers. And I'd like to again close by honoring our veterans.
Anything else?
No.
Fred, anything for you?
No.
I don't have anything either, so it is 6:40. This meeting is adjourned.